ICQ Podcast, episode 313, CW Invaders Game. Well, hello fellow Hamvention radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 313th episode of the ICQ Hamvention Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Peter Caffrey and Daniel Sullivan, Kilo Charlie 3, November Kilo Foxtrot, and of course our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M0NJX is joined by Edmund Mike 0, Mike November Golf, Matthew Mike 0, November Juliet X-Ray, Dan Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Ruth Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar to discuss the latest Hamvention radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature by Bill Barnes, November 3, Juliet India X-Ray, entitled CW Invaders Game, which is a training aid for helping you to learn Morse code. Well, it's always our donors that keep us advert free here on the ICQ podcast. We'd like to thank Peter Caffrey. Peter, we did drop you a line trying to find out your call sign and any message, but unfortunately your mail bounced back. So feel free to drop us a mail at icqpodcast.com and we'll make sure we thank you properly in an upcoming show. But Daniel Sullivan says, call sign Kilo Charlie 3, November Kilo Foxtrot. Thoroughly enjoy listening to all the different topics you present in each show. So Daniel, thanks a lot for supporting us. And your donation, along with those monthly subscription donors, keep us advert free. I don't know if you've noticed how much your favourite coffee shop is charging for these extortionate seasonal Christmas festive coffees at the moment. All I'd suggest you do, guys, is have a look at how much they're charging for it and see how much a regular Americano is, and maybe you could send the change our way to help keep our show advert free. Certainly those few extra dollars and pounds and euros would certainly help us out along the way and save you some calories too. Think of it like that maybe, but there you go. Hi. Okay, now so we're going to head over to our news section now, where we've got Martin and we've got Edmund, Matthew, Dan and Ruth, and they're going to be looking at a new ham radio antenna bill that's being drafted, and wishing FunQ1 a happy birthday. Hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 313 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight I have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi Edmund.
Hello Martin. Hello everybody.
Hiya. I also have Mr. Matthew Nassau M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
Yeah, seen a lot of you recently, Matt, as well, and that's good news.
Indeed.
Yeah. Jumping across the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you, Dan. And last but not least, we have our Ruth Willet, KM4LAO. I should almost call it Zero Ruth. I'm getting it wrong, aren't I?
Yes, it's great to be on. Good to be here. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you on with us. And I know you have a hard stop, so we're going to push on and move forward. Our first news story talks about new ham radio antenna bill being drafted. And the ARRL Legislative Committee are drafting this bill. And Dan, I'm going to get you to go first on it because it's your side of the pond, but is this a replacement to the Parity Act, or is it telling people about how much power they can run?
Well, it's a little of both. The ARRL news story actually covers both. The first part of the story is the replacement for the Parity Act, and it's just saying that they're started on it and not really a lot of progress yet on it, but it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. The second one is actually more interesting, in my humble opinion. What the FCC is saying is that they may remove the amateur radio exemption from RF exposure measurement requirements. And so while in the past we've and I teach this in the tech class, that we should be aware of RF exposure and this kind of thing. Well, the rules have been pretty lax about having to actually measure it. Well, now they're saying, well, you may have to start measuring it, and depending on what the exposure limits are, this could be a big thing for ham radio, especially for those folks that are running big power.
Yeah, well, I agree with you because when I did my American license, the power requirements and the exposure was something that we don't cover in the UK because we don't use quite as much power as you guys. But it was a big difference. Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one?
Definitely interesting. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about it. Just definitely enjoyed hearing from Dan his thoughts on it. But I'm very curious for the bill itself, just kind of seeing what it ends up as, because I know the Parity Act hasn't gone too far in the last couple of years. So I'm curious what this new bill will end up doing. And I'm also be interesting to see what happens with the RF exposure stuff. I mean, I suppose it's a decent idea to know how high you can go with the exposure, but since there's so many hams that run a lot of high power, it could be tricky trying to get that figured out. So I'm curious to see where this ends up going.
And I think you made a cogent point there. You said, well, you don't know that much about it. I'd say that 80 to 90% of hams don't really know anything about it. And that's going to be the kicker here. For sure.
Yeah. Well, I remember one of the test questions in the test pool, Dan, is which is the most dangerous frequency? And it's something like 80 meters, 6 meters, 2 meters, and 23 SEMS. And every UK license holder goes for 23 SEMS because it's a microwave band and you should stay away from them. And the FCC, in your exam question, Paul, it's actually 6 meters because large parts of the body are resonant at 6 meters. And if you're running 1.5 kilowatts, you don't want to be too close to it. So
absolutely. Yeah. And if you have a 6 meter beam and running high power, you want to make sure you can't point it at your neighbor's house.
Yeah, too true. Matthew, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was, as everyone's talking, I'm desperately trying to remember what that question that I had in my exam a couple of years ago for the full license, which was around the RF proximity of the power level for a certain ratio in RF for amateur radio. So I'm trying to think of the formula, but I know I was asked something around that. Don't get too close to an antenna or a radiating element. And there was some formula that kind of indicated that there was an inverse square law or something that happened with the energy. But and if I was asked to answer the question on air, I couldn't say what. As I remember, as Dan's pointing out, I couldn't really put my finger on what suitable RF proximity would be for and at what frequency. So Matt's got to go on a refresher course.
Yeah, no problems, Matt.
FCC OET Bulletin 65. You can download that free from the FCC website.
Oh, you're the man. You are the man. All right.
Well, I remember when I worked at a PMR company, they were, it was a licensed amateur was going to do some tests, and they had 5 watts of UHF going into the antenna, 21 element toner. I think the gain was something like 23 dB gain. And I went, there's no way I'm standing anywhere near the front of that. So, but quite horrible. Anyway, Edmund, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll put my hand up and say that I'm not overly familiar with exposure limits either, which is possibly a failing on my part. But in my defence, I tend to run QRP. And I don't tend to put it into high gain antennas. So the thing that out in this article that made my ears prick up again was this thing about the exposure limits. And given that amateurs are unique compared to other licensees in the sense that we can go portable or mobile, I was just wondering how this would work in practice in terms of enforcement or implementation. So if, for example, I was sitting in a traffic jam on the M25 and I had a rig that could push out, I think there is a mobile rig, isn't there, that will do about, is it 70 watts on 2 meters FM 100% continuous duty cycle. If I key that up into my 7/8 wavelength antenna on top of my car, for example, and there's traffic all around me, how would that sit with the exposure regulations? Or would it? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but you might find a lot of cars' engine management systems cut out. And most modern cars these days, they recommend you don't run more than, I think, 10 watts, 10 to 15 watts in the car. So it keeps it from breaking down, Edmund. So
that was just a hypothetical question, Martin, by the way. I've got no intention of actually doing it.
No, but there is an amateur that lives somewhere in the south of England's got a 400-watt linear in his boot and a massive antenna on the top and drives round. I would imagine his alternator and batteries suffer quite badly, but we'll go from there. But yeah, an interesting one to keep your eye on, certainly if you live in the States and if you live in other parts of the world. RF exposure is important to look at. If you haven't never looked at it, now's the time to do it. It's never too late. So go from that. Moving on to our next story. Happy birthday to FunCube 1. Satellite AO73 was launched 6 years ago. It's just had its 6th birthday. Ruth, you're a satellite person. What's your thoughts?
I love hearing about that. These CubeSats have been in the air for so long. FunCube's a really great satellite, and it's so incredible that it's now gotten up to its 6th birthday. It's been such a good project, and it just makes me happy seeing how many small CubeSats can be launched and work well for years on end. So great news, and I'm excited to see where the project goes from here.
Yeah, right. Well, as I say, great interesting story. Edmonds, you and I got elk antennas, although we haven't done much on the satellites, but I have had a couple of contacts. What's your thoughts?
Oh, well, you're ahead of me then. Due to a mixture of work pressure, family commitments, disorganisation, laziness, lack of self-training, and many other excuses, I am still yet to do anything with satellites other than receive. So, feeling very ashamed of myself, I will say happy birthday to FunCube and leave it at that, I think, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, no problems at all. Matthew, you're mainly an HF person. I don't know if you've done any looking at the satellites, and certainly if you had a FunCube dongle, you could download the telemetry off this one.
Well, I feel like following Edmund's footsteps. I mean, he's qualified himself so low down the satellite experience curve, but there's always someone who's behind you, below you, and that's probably me. But the whole, I mean, I've got a little 2-meter 70 SEM mobile rig, and I've seen people using that particular model, you know, to kind of do the transmit and the tracking with the Doppler shift, and you've got the channels, and you keep track of things, and you have your elk or your arrow antenna pointing over the horizon. And it always seems like a really exciting thing to do, to try and hunt for a satellite and try and get a contact. But as you say, apathy, time, life, experience, inexperience, whatever gets in the way, and you kind of put it on a list. You think, I'll do that. I will do that one day, but it's cold outside right now. So I haven't dragged myself out to listen to satellites. But I'm staggered. There's a great little photograph in our show notes of someone working on this particular FunCube. I don't know if it's the representative of the one we're talking about, but they're tiny. They're absolutely tiny. People maybe don't realize this thing is less than 1 kilogram. So, you know, what is that in old money? About a pound or something? No, like 2 pounds. And yet this thing has been floating in space, traveling 750 million miles over and over. It's done 32,000 orbits of the Earth, and it keeps going. And it seems to be in very good health. So it's amazing that these tiny little things that were once the domain of huge government agencies and massive aerospace industries are being produced at reasonable cost and taking advantage of reasonable flight costs. It still costs money to get them up there, I'm sure. But it's just a target waiting to be used by us Earthlings to make communication. So It's inspiration. I'm going to get a book on satellite work and have a read up and see how far behind the curve I am. And then I'll lend it to Edmund.
Right. Okay, guys. Well, there's some good stuff on the AMSAT website if you go and have a look for beginners and how to do these things. Now, you say it's small. 10 centimetre cube, or in Dan's and my money, 4 inches cubed, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
So, I mean, have you played with any of this, Dan, or?
I haven't actually played with the FunCube, but you know what I think has been the coolest thing about the FunCube project is their educational component. You know, on their website, they have a whole page on educational outreach, and there's a great picture of a guy talking to a bunch of grade school kids. And I think, you know, a lot of these other satellites, they get launched and you know, that's it. You know, hams can use it. But here they've made a real effort to get the kids involved.
Yeah, they certainly did. And in my opinion, I mean, one of the things I used to like doing with the FunCube, I have a FunCube dongle, and I used to receive the telemetry as it went, the sat went over. So that was quite an interesting thing, and that was sort of done for schools as well. And they do sort of have messages up there. They were transmitting messages to schools and groups. So anybody monitoring it, yeah, every now and again they got a message, which was quite good. So I liked it. So, yeah, happy birthday, FunCube 1. Right, moving on. Now, this appeared in the register and came up. But it turns out in the UK there's a company called Halfords that there was a write-up in the register about. And Halfords, for those of you who don't know, if you don't live in the UK, sell bicycles, car spares, car accessories, and that sort of items, including car radios. But they have been telling people that digital radio, DAB, is super fast and it goes faster than AM, and you can pick up lots of foreign stations. Now, that's totally and utterly not obeying the laws of physics. Edmund, go on, you go first on this one.
Well, there's so much wrong with this, I almost don't know where to start. For a start, in that article, they referred to wavelengths and then quoted frequencies in kilohertz. The frequency they quoted, was it 75 from memory? If
Right.
you transmitted a signal on 75 kilohertz in AM, you would wipe out certainly DCF 77 kilohertz, the time signal from Germany, and probably MSF 60 on 60 kilohertz from Anthorn in the UK. Another problem is that, ironically, the opposite of what they claim is likely to be true. And they could have proven this themselves if they'd wanted to test their claim. If you get a traditional AM/FM radio and tune it into a station, and then tune in the same station on a DAB radio sitting next to it, then with the exception of Classic FM, who synchronise their signals deliberately, in almost all cases, the DAB signal will be behind the analogue one, sometimes by several seconds, presumably due to the encoding and then decoding of the digital signal, whereas that doesn't happen. So arguably the reverse is true. DAB is behind the analogue equivalent. As far as foreign stations go, it is technically possible to decode multiplexes from, I think it's mainly the Netherlands, if you're on the south coast of the UK. There's a chap down near Southampton from memory who has a YouTube channel. The name there, I think, is Mad Radio DXer, if you wanted to have a look. And he does have a few videos of him decoding DAB multiplexes from continental Europe during lift conditions, but that is niche and specialised in the extreme. And the only other way you would do it would be if a multiplex in the UK happened to carry a station from abroad or a station in the UK that transmits in a foreign language. For example, Sunrise Radio in London, which since time immemorial has transmitted in a language other than English. But apart from that, this is clearly just a way of trying to flog DAB car radios, and I'm not impressed at all. And they could have disproven their own claims with a little bit of research that they could have done at very little cost to themselves. So it's all a bit rubbish, really, isn't it, Martin? Back to you.
Yeah, kind of. I think Dan, you summed it up well. This is hooey, isn't it?
Well, what I said is I picked up on their subtitle here. It says, or their marketing department is talking utter hoop. That must be a British expression. Here we'd say it's utter poop.
Yeah. But the thing is, you and I teach amateur radio. You know, you can't change the laws of physics to suit a marketing campaign, can you?
No, you can't. That's for sure. Or you can, but you don't expect to get away with it.
Yeah. I was to say, I thought it was interesting. Matthew, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I can only sympathize with the buyer who went into Halfords and maybe had this conversation. I was just the other week in another chain store selling electronics, and I was looking for a VGA to HDMI adapter for a display that I have. Actually, I was going to use a Raspberry Pi, which has an HDMI output for graphics. And I have a spare VGA monitor. So I said, you got a cable for one of those? You got an adapter? And then the salesperson, I think he was trying to be helpful, proceeded to then explain how they were completely incompatible. They were completely, different languages. They were, doing everything apart from saying one was digital, one was analog, and that you can get a converter for it, but we don't sell it. That was basically the outcome of the conversation. And it was a sort of, had I not known exactly what I was looking for and understand it a little bit about the magic that goes between one end of the cable and the next, you could have been left being pseudo-hyped and pseudo-scienced out of the conversation. So I can relate to the story about the DAB buyer for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is. I mean, Ruth, you must have sort of giggled when you heard what we were talking about and thinking that there's people doing silly things, but it must happen all over the world, really, mustn't it?
That's for sure. I mean, it's certainly a shame that this marketing is so incredibly wrong. I mean, for me, I'm like, if you're selling something, take the time to be able to figure out how it works and talk about it accurately. And I mean, radio waves, it's incredibly well known. It's RF travels at the speed of light. Like, it makes sense. And especially for me, because I'm a student. I'm studying engineering and physics. And I'm like, I feel very strongly that if you're doing marketing or whatnot and you're involving science, that you need to be very accurate in what you're doing. So it's certainly a shame that this was so off target. And hopefully they will get it fixed.
Yeah, well, it'll be very easy. I mean, for us, it's very easy for us to knock this and say it's stupid, because it is. But for argument's sake, let's take a student doing agriculture or farming. They wouldn't be necessarily into the technical stuff and wouldn't be interested in it. So they could be easily hoodwinked with this. And it is a worry, as Matthew said. But, it's an interesting one. Gave us a bit of a smile anyway.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely want to be able to, I mean, if they're talking about it, they might as well try to explain it better in a way that's understandable. So like an agriculture student or someone who doesn't know would be able to understand and be like, oh, that's a great product. But don't just say what it's not even doing.
Yeah, totally. Well, moving on. The next two news stories, guys, I'm going to roll together. The FCC is proposing an auction of the C-band to increase competition for allocation. So, looks like over there in the States you're going to lose some of your 5 gigs. And the FCC is starting to clear out the 3.4 gig band. So, you're starting to lose stuff. Dan, how much is this going to affect you over there?
Well, so I was looking up how many people are actually using these bands, and I don't think that's going to be that much of an effect. From a practical point of view, at least at this point, I think that, some people that might be wanting to experiment in those areas are going to have more of a problem. But yeah, I don't know. This whole FCC thing now is they're in a headlong rush, really, to do something about 5G. They for some reason they feel like they're getting behind, or the businesses that are promoting 5G feel like they're falling behind, and that's what's kind of fueling all this rush to find spectrum.
Yeah. Well, 5G seems to be the big thing that everybody wants at the moment, which is, obviously you say you got to find spectrum somewhere. Ruth, what's your thoughts?
It's definitely a shame when they're trying to clear out hams from spectrum that we've been allocated to try to get other, like 5G on the air. I mean, I definitely see that 5G is the big thing and they're trying to make space for it, but it's a shame that just trying to figure out there's only limited space and trying to make it all work, that the default is to push some of the hams out. So hopefully we can kind of come to a consensus and try to find somewhere in the middle so that we're not pushed all the way out, but also, I guess, so that 5G can get the space that they need to operate, as long as they don't interfere with us. So hopefully we can keep as much bands as we can.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we can keep it. Now, I know the boys in the UK, including me, are not microwave people. Matthew, you're predominantly an HF person, so what do you think?
Well, it's, I just sit by the sidelines and see this stuff going on. Because I'm struck by the article on a couple of fronts. One is that 5G is growing and growing and growing. Of course it is, and then it'll be 6G after that, and there'll be 7G. So the cram into the spectrum space to be able to have that future, if you want, that we are creating for ourselves, this digital future of communications, of seamless data pulling into and out of cloud computers and what have you. It's got to go somewhere. And, the spectrum is finite, but the opportunities for the next 50 years of communications is ever expanding. So someone's going to make a hard decision by looking at what's available, what spectrum is required for these technologies, who's got it today. I guess we got this band. I say we, at least it's in the US, but amateurs were given this band. They didn't pay for it. They were enabled to have it at a time probably when 5G wasn't even 1G, right? And so we're being asked to move on. We're like squatters to some extent. People see the value of the land that we're standing on, and we've got to be moved out. And looking at the numbers, it's going to be tens of billions of dollars, right? There would be huge amounts of investment in 5G services, and they will recoup that money through the bid winners, if you like, the auction winners, providing services, because we will pay for it. We as consumers. So on the one hand, there's this idealism about, we're amateurs and we're entitled to this and we should defend it and so forth. But we are very, very small compared to the powers that drive the economy, powers that enable quality of life going forward. It's a big, big question that's being answered here. But at the same time, I love the fact that people are operating above 30 megahertz, because I think that's amazing. Anything above 30 megahertz seems like a science fiction to me. I do like my HF. I can understand it. I can see it. I can feel it almost. But you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I know where you're coming from. I get grief within the family because although I do have a smartphone, I don't tend to use it as a smartphone. In fact, as Matthew would tell me, there's no good point in sending me social media messages because I don't see them on my phone or text messages usually. And
you say you take this in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
For you, the smartphone is coming later in the world to you, and you don't have the dependency on it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a generation behind me, maybe two behind you, but one behind me, where it is the social glue that keeps them together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can leave the house and not take my phone with me if I leave it behind, and I don't worry about it. I just get on with my life. But I know there are people that are desperate with their phones. But there you go. And I think people want to be connected all the time. They want to be able to stream last night's TV program to their phone and things like that. So 5G will only get bigger the amount of usage. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
I think you're using a phone as a phone. Shock horror. And I also think that sometimes there is no greater pleasure in life than switching everything off, being uncontactable, and going offline and being incommunicado for a while. Nothing nicer. So well done, Martin. That's what I think. But you're asking me about the news story, aren't you?
I am, mate, yeah.
Okay. Well, I've never used 3 gigs, and I've certainly never used it in America, so it's not a band I'm overly familiar with. It mentions in the news story about slap bang in the middle of the frequency range mentioned there are some satellite downlinks, possibly. And whilst it may be possible to shift satellites, uplinks and downlinks within a band by sending some commands from an Earth station somewhere, to switch it all together to a different band would involve presumably a hardware modification, which ain't going to be very easy to do from the ground. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. And on the principle of the thing, the number of times in my life that I've realised why the saying, give an inch and they'll take a mile, exists. Yes, everything Matt says is true. Obviously, in a straight fight between radio amateurs and 5G, radio amateurs aren't going to come out on top. But I do rather wonder if we don't sort of put up any kind of representational process, if this is just going to turn into the thin end of the wedge. And human beings normally only care about changes when they directly affect them. So, okay, I'm not worried about 3 gigs today, personally. But then next week, tomorrow, next month, whenever, when the powers that be come for a band that I do like and that I do use, if I don't stand up for 3 gigs, who else in the radio amateur fraternity is going to stand up for me when it's a band that I like and use that's coming under attack? So mixed feelings about this one, Martin.
Yeah, I get where you're all coming from on this one. I don't think we're going to win it. I would suggest they're going to have to leave us a portion of the band for satellite use, because you can't do much with the satellites that are up there. And it may be as the satellites drop off that we'll lose the allocation, but in the short term. Right, moving on to our last news story. UK beginner's license and M17 DMR in KB6NU's blog. Well, that happens to be Dan Romanchik, who's with us tonight. And, Dan, I must admit I apologise to John if he's listening, G4SWX, who I tried to talk to, and John tried to talk to me at the RSGB convention, and we were both being pulled from pillar to post. I've been meaning to get hold of John, and unfortunately it hasn't happened because life things over here have been pretty busy. But you wrote this up. You know, both sides of the pond are talking about potentially going for a beginner's license, aren't they, Dan?
Well, I think here we've pretty much gone past this, unfortunately. The recommendations from the ARRL committee looking into this was simply to expand tech privileges, which seems to go against what the research says. But what John here proposes is pretty much what kind of the novice class used to be here in the U.S. When I started in ham radio, we had this novice class, and it was easy to get licensed, and it gave you very limited privileges, and you had to upgrade right away. I mean, that's pretty much what John's saying here, except now we novices got privileges in the HF spectrum, and he's proposing giving novices VHF and UHF. I forget which one privileges, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if any of you guys sort of pick up on this over there, and what if it ever did get implemented, what effect it would have. Because, like I say, I think all the research here, and Bruce K1BG was the guy who did a lot of it. All his research pointed to the fact that the novice license, an easy to get license with limited privileges, really spurred on the growth of ham radio. And that's something I've written about this in the blog and other posts, that I just don't see the new tech expanded privileges proposal doing.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, and I mean, I'm sitting on the fence on this one, Dan, a little bit, because if the object is to get more people in the hobby and give them a very, very restricted license because you want to pull people into the hobby, then I understand what you're doing. If you just want to have an easy test so that people can talk to their friends down the road, then there are other ways of doing it. I mean, we have the 446 license-free frequencies in Europe. You have the family services, don't you, or something like that. And there's CB, and there's nothing wrong with CB. But if it's just two people talking to each other and you're not going to do anything technical, I'm not sure, Dan, is the truthful answer.
Well, no, and you're right about that. And if you read the proposal, what he's saying is this would be administered by clubs, which I don't think that would ever happen here very well. But because of that, the clubs would then be responsible for those folks and helping them get into ham radio in a more in-depth way. And that's kind of the key to this proposal, not just sort of giving them a license so they can talk to their friends down the road.
Right. Okay. Ruth, you've come through and done your license. What do you think on this? Would it get some of your friends involved if there was an easy way in?
There's definitely pros and cons to low-level licenses. This one, just looking at it, it does seem like a pretty good proposal to get people in the door. And yeah, I definitely do know people who would be interested, who are already interested and might be able to go ahead and do the first step into the hobby with a slightly not as technical license. But, thinking about it, if it's implemented well, this could be a really good boon to the hobby and get more people involved. But like I always said, we as hams definitely have the responsibility to keep people interested and help them learn even more and hopefully upgrade to longer level licenses, which is what I try to do anyway with friends who I know are interested in the hobby in general. But yeah, it definitely could be a potentially very useful thing, especially since everything I've read about the UK and all of their programs for getting more people interested in the hobby have had great success.
Edmund, what's your thoughts on this potential UK license or states license?
I think I've made my feelings known on this subject in one of the previous editions of the ICQ podcast, but in brief, I agree with you, Martin. If you have an interest in radio, then do the foundation license, and that way you get access to most of the HF bands as well, if you don't find lots of people to talk to on 2 meters straight away. If you're interested in radio in general, just for chatting to people but don't want to pass the test, then CB's available, or you can actually do quite well on legal PMR 446 using half a watt. I've probably I've not added it up, but I must be well into double figures by now on that band, just by using legal half a watt little walkie-talkie handheld radios that you can get, and on that band, height and tropospheric ducting are your friends. And if you want radio comms for a particular purpose, maybe because you are involved in marshalling events or own a 4x4 and you join a 4x4 rescue group, then join or set up a group that has a UK simple license, which I think is £75 for 5 years from memory, and that gets you 3 frequencies around 449 megahertz and several more than that, somewhere around just above and just below 170 megs. So yeah, I think the options that are already available more than adequately cover it without needing to introduce a VHF, UHF only Novice license, if that's the correct name for it.
Yeah. One correction, though. Sorry to correct you on that. There's now 7 frequencies at UHF. Ofcom added a few more.
Oh, yes, around 458, didn't they?
They did.
Are those actually available yet, or have they just been earmarked?
According to Mr. Rothwell, who has a PMR simple light license for events he does, yes, they are.
Oh,
So-
well, you learn something every day when you listen to the podcast, don't you?
You certainly do. Matthew, what's your thoughts on these simple light licenses?
So there's a general theme, right? That we want to get people in the hobby. We recognize that at any age level, we'll take them. It don't really matter if it's encouraging the youths or people who have come back to the hobby or whatever. So there's always a positive motivation to bring people in. And let's speak from the UK's perspective. We have the 3-tiered licensing. Getting a full license is a big investment. It's a lot of time. Even with the recent changes, it's a lot of stuff to know, and you really have to be kind of into the hobby to do it. I understand. If we go down to the other end of the scale, we have the foundation license, which typically, I think, Martin, you've got good experience. You can get a license in 2 days. A 2-day structured learning course, and you sit your exam. And again, you have to show some motivation. You want to learn about the hobby, you want to get into it, and you set down a weekend to study, and you hopefully you pass. And then you get your call sign, and away you go. And you have all the privileges of not just VHF, UHF, but HF, and power limits and so forth. But the world really opens up. Is there a need? Is there a space below foundation to introduce them to VHF only or VHF, UHF only? I don't know. Just sort of setting aside the academic question of how much space there is in licensing and what they'd have to learn, how long would the training be, and all that kind of stuff. What's the downside? What's the risk of introducing people to, 2 meters or 77s after, let's say, 4 hours of training on a $20 Bofeng rig? What happens? Do they suddenly become abusive? Does it risk polluting the airwaves with inexperienced chatter that may be not using the calling frequency correctly, or maybe, I don't know, whatever. That's a risk, true, but people can go and buy these rigs anyway. Right? If they know it's there and they fancy having a go, they could spend the $20 or $5 secondhand or something and pick one of these things up. So the ability to abuse the airwaves and create disruption or what have you is a latent risk that's always there. So if it's not so much about polluting the airwaves, if I can use that adjective, what other negatives would there be? Other than getting more people actively talking on the air at probably the lowest price point in radio, both in terms of equipment and effort to sit down and do exams, I don't really see a lot to disqualify them from doing this. The open question is, how big is a jump between this proposed training, 2, 3, 4 hours at a club level versus doing 2 days for a foundation license?
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump in, Matthew. From my point of view, I can understand why John's saying a VHF UHF license, because in the UK he's the RSGB VHF manager. And I'm not knocking you, John, because I spend most of my time on VHF and UHF. Let's be honest about it. So for me, yeah, I would have more people to talk to and the bands would be more used. The downside I see is, if somebody only does a 10 question or whatever, let's assume it's 10 questions and it's very, very straightforward, and they go out and buy a walkie-talkie or a handy-talkie, as the States call them, and you're then on the air, they're going to say they're amateur radio people. And the difference between a complete novice license and somebody who's done some training, they won't necessarily be able to answer questions to the general public when the general public asks them. And I just look at the students I teach. When they pass the foundation license, they have a big smile of achievement that they've achieved something. And I just feel that if there's no achievement factor, and these people can say, oh, I'm an amateur radio person, but they haven't done any of the knowledge, it's a bit like saying you're a taxi driver, but you only know a street's within about half a mile of your house,
Okay, so let's follow that logic. If they have a special B designator, so they're MB0, whatever, I don't know, saying they're beginners, they could rightly claim that they're amateurs, right? They're amateur radio guys, right? They have spectrum. They've done some tests. They've got a certificate on the wall. They've done something, and presumably they have a call sign. So they've registered at Ofcom, and there you go. Now, are they ambassadors for the hobby because they can talk about effective radiated power and near field radiation strengths like we couldn't earlier on this podcast? Probably not, right? Would that tarnish the image of amateur radio if we had more people walking around saying, I can do some of it. I'm not working on this frequency, but I do this net every Wednesday night, blah, 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 and they talk about it. First, aren't even qualified hams are not necessarily good ambassadors for the hobby.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree with you.
Feeders, and they should know better. And they've got probably years of experience. They got upset with somebody else, and they take it out, right? They misuse the hobby in that way. If we take a step back, this is about encouraging people to maybe that first step into the foundation 2-day commitment is too much. It's too formal. It's too. It's not a taster of the hobby. And so creating a very low entry point, limited power and limited entitlement. I mean, maybe that is what we need.
Yeah.
I'll just throw this out too, is that I think that for this to be something like this to be successful, the clubs really do have to get involved, and it has to be kind of more structured, right? I mean, you'd want to have certain activities already planned that you would like expect these folks to jump into, and over a year or 2 years, raise their proficiency. Yeah, but so getting, that happened in the U.S., right? A lot of novices got licenses, and then some of them never even got on the air, but a lot of them did. A lot of them did get involved, and it worked great for those folks, So that's the thing, it's not going to work for everybody, and I don't think we need to try and make it perfect. But I'm a believer in looking at the positive side, and there's still a lot of guys on the air today that were novices back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just come back to, we done a foundation course in the UK. We had 6 people pass. We don't force people to be a member of the club. 3 of the members are members, 3 of the people that passed are members of the club, and they will get supporters going forward. One of the young lad will get extra support because I know him anyway, so he's an extra one. But there are 2 which we'll probably never ever see again. Now, most people are totally mic shy when they first get their license. So whether they get their license in this simple license, or whether they get their license in going for a foundation, unless they get support afterwards, it's very worrying. And one of the guys that passed said to me, I've not had a contact yet since I passed the course. And I said, well, right, we've got to get you on the air. And the easiest way to do it is have a chat with somebody you know. And we were arranging schedules for him the other day. But if you're just going to turn up, get your license and disappear, I think a lot of these people will disappear. That's just my thoughts. And yeah, I think we discussed it a long time, but what do you think, guys?
Well, I don't think we're going to solve it here, but we're just throwing it out and let's let other folks, chime in on it too. That was my whole point in throwing it up on my website.
Yeah. What you've done is you've opened up a discussion point, which is good. And we're not falling out about it. We're discussing it, which is good. I'm not 100% sure, wherever it is. If we go for an extra 4th tier license, I'm in the hobby, I will support that, but we're discussing it, which is a good thing, I think.
One thing I'm just thinking about, what if you introduced these things on a timed limit so that you could do this taster course, have rights to use the bands on VHF, UHF, but it's good for 2 years or 1 year, and then you're licensed.
Yeah, and I you're right, and I think that's part of his proposal here.
Oh, is it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Because that provides a natural impetus. You either kind of take it up, or if you're one of those people that passed the exam and you never really followed through, then it lapses. No harm, no foul. But if you then feel the appetite to learn more, you got a clock ticking, kind of propels you forward.
Yeah.
Right, and that was a key point provision in the U.S. novice license. At first you had a year to upgrade it, and then it went to 2 years, and now it's unlimited. I never understood the reasoning for that, but the in the beginning there was a time limit where it expired, and then you're just out of luck.
And I think Dan's other point about the clubs being a key part of the growth of these students. It sounds like this is sort of a grassroots approach of getting people in the clubs, training them locally, getting them mentored, getting them involved in events, and then, trying to encourage them to continue with club events and come back to the club and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the big questions. Do we have a club infrastructure? Or do we have enough clubs that would want to invest time with these people to build them up?
I think we do. But the other thing is, I think more than that, if we go down this route, I think the national societies of whichever country have got to start promoting the new license system, because unless Joe Public knows it exists, you're not going to get the input. So you've got to do some form of marketing, spend marketing money on it. I don't know whether it's television or radio advertising or magazine advertising or whatever. But if the general public don't know it exists, if they just come up with, we'll come up with this new licensing system, then you can have it, but you won't get the numbers in that will make it a worthwhile success, I would suggest.
Could I
you're
just
right,
raise a word of caution against time limitations? Just because somebody hasn't upgraded after 1 year or 2 years or whatever it is, doesn't prove automatically that they have no wish or interest or desire to do so. It could simply mean that circumstances in their lives are such that they haven't had the possibility of doing it. And in my case, if there had been a 1 year limit or even a 2 year limit on upgrading from one license to the next, I wouldn't be an M0 today, because I would have forfeited my intermediate 2E0 license. And that wouldn't have been simply because I didn't wish to upgrade. It would have been because nobody or no club locally was running a full license course at a venue that I could get to on a day and a time that I could get to as a full-time employee. So time limits always makes me feel very wary when that suggestion comes up.
Yeah, I can understand that. Well, I think we've put some interesting suggestions into the pot for those of you listening, and for those of you who want to take this forward. We're willing to talk to people about that. Obviously, I'm sure Dan would talk to people the same as I would, and the rest of the guys. So let's see how this one pans out. Right, Dan, what have you been doing since the last time I had a chat with you?
Well, so one thing I've done is I've got a new radio. I've got a Flex 6400 on the air now, and it's quite a radio. It's very cool.
All right, so that's you and Bill got Flexes now.
Yeah.
So you still doing Morse with it, or are you doing lots of other bits and pieces with it?
I have only done Morse code with it to this point. But I mean, it's a big learning experience. Obviously, like one of the things it can do with an extra software download, it can do a digital voice mode called FreeDV, and it uses a non-proprietary codec. And I guess there's not really a lot of activity on, but with a Flex radio, you can do that all natively in the radio now. If I was still using my IC7300, for example, I'd have to, somehow pipe the audio into my computer and let the computer do all the processing. But now with the Flex can do all that natively. So, and I think there's some, it's so much in here. I think there's other kind of cool things like that you can do with it. And like I say, I'm just sort of scratching the surface, but right now. But it's a very cool radio, and I'm looking forward to having lots of fun with it.
Right, so I take it that was an early Christmas present then, Dan?
Yeah, kind of an early Christmas present of myself.
Yeah. Good on you. That's all I'm going to say. Well, that's good news. Edmund, what have you been up to? Very
little, really. On the last Friday in November, I went to France for a day trip. Some colleagues from work, the annual cultural exchange, or booze cruise as it's more commonly known. And just near City Europe, there's a small mound. It's like a little sort of hill thing, not very high above the ground, but you can walk up to the top of it. So I took my handheld up there and called CQ quite a lot on 2 meters, and nobody came back to me. But I ended up having 3 QSOs, and the way I did it was that I listened to the simplex channels either side of the calling channel, and there were nets and there were QSOs going on. So when a busy frequency fell silent, I waited about 10 seconds, and if nobody else came up, I transmitted, gave a call sign and said, is anybody who was talking on here a few seconds ago still monitoring? And as a result, I had people come back and work me. So for those of you who are new to 2 meters or new to the hobby in general even, you don't have to call CQ on the calling channel. You can do it on other frequencies as well if you think that there's a chance that somebody might be lurking. I think that's a technique known as tail ending, isn't it? And it certainly worked in my case. So if you're calling away there on 145500 and you're not getting any results, then that's a little tip that might be worth trying. But apart from that, Martin, I've done absolutely nothing at all. Possibly this weekend I might clip extra lengths of wire onto my 40-meter dipole so that it will become an 80-meter dipole. And if I do get round to doing that, then it'll probably stay like that over the Christmas and New Year periods. And I'll try giving 80 meters a go, which is open for much of the day at this time of year, as well as throughout the night. And using QRP and trying to overcome the high noise level I have here, I might have a go at working a few people using SSB or CW. So if you're on that band, then maybe I'll have the pleasure of working you over the festive period.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Edmund. Sounds good. Okay, Ruth, so what have you been up to since our last podcast?
Well, amateur radio this past month has been pretty slow for me personally, just because it's been a blur of classes, midterms, Thanksgiving break, and now I've got finals in about a week and a half. But I've been staying involved, working with the Kettering University Amateur Radio Club. We're hoping to do a fox hunt at Kettering, which should be a lot of fun and hopefully get a lot of interest from students. And I'm also trying to stay warm and just trying to get caught up on a couple of logs for some satellite passes that I've been on so that I can get those all up to date in Logbook of the World. But right now it's been busy with classes and doing satellite passes when I can, and looking forward to Christmas break to do even more.
Well, that sounds great, Ruth. Listen, as I say, best of luck with your exams in a couple of weeks' time. And as I say, enjoy. And if we don't speak to you before for the new year, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruth. Matt, you're off out the country soon, but what have you been up to?
Yeah, it's perhaps a little bit of a mixed bag. Maybe I'll start off by sharing a small story. About April this year, I decided that I needed to get into shape. You know, I'm in my mid-40s, and I've never gone running. I've never done any exercise or swimming or anything like that. And so I got into a little app on my phone called Couch to 5K, I think it's called. Couch to 5K. And it's basically an inspirational app. You listen to it, and it coaches you on jogging. So you can start off, jog for 2 minutes, take a walk for a minute, jog for 2 minutes, take a walk for 2 minutes. And it's, very positive and upbeat. And over a period of about 9 or 10 weeks, I went from literally zero, where I was gasping for breath after a minute, to running for 30 minutes and doing like 5 kilometers, or what's that, like three and a half miles or so. And I tried to continue with that through the summer. Now, the reason I'm saying this, and I'll get to the radio point, is that I learned about almost sort of one of those serendipitous moments when you're jogging. And I jog typically in the mornings, 5:30 in the morning here. You realize that you're enjoying something. That's hard. It took a lot of time and effort to get to that point. And it was the diligence of practice that I really discovered. And I kind of made a very tangible connection with me that I could physically go from zero to something substantial, for me, substantial, through practice. And it took time. And I took that learning to my CW. Now, maybe this is a story Dan might want to comment on, but I've learned the code with the mic. With a key, fairly, a couple of years ago, fairly long time ago. But using on the radio and actually having QSOs and, sitting there and listening to, 40 meters and trying to figure out what's going on, it's always been hard. And it's been a, disincentive to some extent. But over this little personal journey of realizing the value of practice, I thought I should stop and start at zero again. Start like I did, sitting on a couch, not being able to move. I should do that with CW. And so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I took a look at different learning tools for CW. There's the G4FON, Morse Tutor, the Farnsworth methodology, all this kind of stuff. There's lots of good apps for the phone. Some of them are free, some of them are not free, websites and so forth. And I came across a friend of mine gave me a link from a Facebook posting about a guy that had a website called Morse Code Ninja. And I want to ask Dan, have you ever heard this website, morsecode.ninja?
I've heard of it, but I haven't really looked at it.
Yeah. So it's a guy, as far as I can tell, it's a chap called Kurt Zogelman, and he's AD0WE, so Alpha Delta Zero Whiskey Echo, and he explains his journey in learning code, but it's his description of learning head copy. And even he's posting blogs that he's doing head copy at 30, 35 words a minute, listening to Cat in the Hat stories or something, but extremely quickly. And so much so that he was encouraging people to kind of start at the beginning again and kind of build up head copying methodology, really from the very, basic letter, the letter E, letter T. This is letter E, this is letter T. So much so that he invested, I think, some money, his personal money, and some time to post on YouTube about 200 videos. And they went up, I think, just at the beginning of November. And there are 200 videos that you can play, one after the other, going through the lessons of each of the letters and repeating the letters and then mixing the letters up. And he's doing it at 20 words a minute with a 10 words a minute spacing. So you get a quick character at a reasonable pace. You're not thinking of dots and dashes. You're thinking of sounds only. So I've embraced it. I'm starting to work through these videos. These videos are 3 or 4 minutes to introduce a new letter, and then it takes about an hour or an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes where he just plays the same letters over and over again, and he mixes them up, and he makes simple 2- and 3-letter words. And you just kind of switch it on and listen to it, relaxing on the sofa or reading a book or something or doing the dishes, just absorbing it. So I'm giving that a go. That's my long story for the end of this podcast, but I'm trying to learn head copy at CW. I'm deconstructing all the stuff that I've learned and trying to rebuild myself from the ground up. So I'm hopefully will report in on this over the next couple of months to see if I can follow through with the practice. I'm talking the talk, but can I walk the walk? And to share maybe how it's working for me. And so, as I say, the website, you can get more information at morsecode.ninja, Ninja. A little bit of other news, I guess. I spent some time with Martin as part of the ICQ podcast at the local Coulsdon Amateur Transmitter Society, Cat's Bazaar, which was on November 24th, which was a lovely little ham radio fair in Coulsdon area. I had a lovely time as ever, met a lot of people. It's a great social activity as well as picking up some super bargains. And so I bought a few bits and pieces, nothing substantial, no radios, nothing significant. But I picked up a few books and actually a spare VGA computer monitor that was going for free. So you cannot say no to something that's going for free. And lastly, last weekend I met Martin again, spot the trend, spot the pattern, on HMS Belfast. And the three of us, Martin, myself, and Tim Price, G4YBU, was where we were staffing the Bridge Wireless office. And it was a fairly slow day. It was only about 18 certificates we gave out, Morse code certificates to the public. And it was very cold inside the wireless office. But other than that, it's been work and family and stuff like that. It's kind of coming up to Christmas as well. So I'm not sure how much radio I'll get done in the next 30 days or so, but that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, well, that's fine. And also Edmund was with us at Cat's Bazaar, so I know he enjoyed himself and went around, got a few bits, didn't you?
I can't believe I forgot that I went to that. Yes, that's something else that I did, Martin. Well remembered.
Yeah, well, I was going to remind you at the end. Well, as the boys said, we went to Cat's Bazaar. I did pick up a couple of items, although I spent probably 90%, 95% of my time on the ICQ podcast stand, talking to listeners and some people who'd never heard of us. After 11 and a half years, there are still people out there in the local area that have never heard the ICQ podcast, which possibly is a bit strange. Moving on, I purchased a few items. I bought an ARRL handbook, an RSGB handbook in mint condition, and a GQRP antenna book, all for £1 each. You know, now, right, the ARRL handbook was 2006, but it was in mint condition. It was just too good to leave on the side. So at some point in time, I'll move it on to somebody who's going to cherish it as much as I have looking at it recently. And I also bought a mag mount for £10, which was brand new in its packet. So that was quite good. And the last thing I bought, I bought it at the Cat's Bazaar, but it wasn't on sale at the Cat's Bazaar. Chris Howard sold me his 4-meter rig because he says he doesn't need it anymore. So I've now got a proper 4-meter mobile with a VFO rather than having a PMR radio for in the car. And I took it to work a couple of days, and around the Surrey-Sussex borders, I was calling CQ forever, and nobody ever came back. But I did manage to catch up with a local net. Spoke to one of the local guys around here, and he told me there was a net on Thursday night, so I joined them on my way home from work. So the rig's good, and I'm on 4 meters. Once again, the boys said I was on HMS Belfast, as Matthew said. Thoroughly enjoyed that, as always. Last bit of news from me. I'm off to Ireland on the 11th, back on the 16th. So I travel on the 11th and I travel home on the 16th. Looking after grandchildren for Colin. Colin and his wife are off to New York Christmas shopping. And yours truly is over there making sure the house doesn't get trashed. Now, I'm not sure how much time I'm going to get to be on the air, because looking at the itinerary sheet Colin's given me, and the fact that my granddaughter attends swimming lessons at 5 o'clock in the morning and dance lessons in the evening, and grandson needs taking to football matches and football training, I don't know how much radio I'm actually going to get done. But you may catch me on the air as EI/M1MRB/P for portable. So that's what I'm up to. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. As I say, unfortunately, Leslie couldn't make it due to work pressures, but Mr. Edmund Spicer joined us, M0MNG.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Martin. 73.
73, no problems. Mr. Master User, M0NJX joined us.
Many thanks, guys.
No
Love the
problems. At the other side of the pond, Mr. Dan Romanchik, great as always, and sorry, I get your call sign right. Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
73's from the U.S.
Yep. And unfortunately, Ruth had a hard stop and had to leave us in the towards the end. She went off to one of her lectures, so at least we heard from Ruth, and it's good news. So I'd like to say 73s to all of you, and as I say, if I don't speak to you before the New Year or Christmas, because I know you're all going to be as busy as me, I wish you a happy Christmas and a happy New Year as well.
And same to you, Martin.
Yeah. So 73s, guys, and we'll continue with the podcast.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Start with news in South Africa. The Council of the SARL has approved a new Novice Award. The award is available to holders of the South African Novice Licence, the ZUs, and is designed to encourage activity across 4 designated bands for the class of licence. Contacts may be made using Morse, single sideband or FM modes as appropriate on 18 metres, 40, 10 and 2 metres, with a minimum of 10 contacts and a maximum of 25 contacts per band. Multiple contacts within the same amateur and contacts via terrestrial repeaters do not count for the award. No QSL cards are needed. Information can be found on the South African Radio League's website. So I think a lovely award there for novices to get them active. AMSAT are supporting a ham radio day aboard the Queen Mary, which is an on-air event which will include satellite operations from RMS Queen Mary. It's taking place on the 14th of December, and the Queen Mary is currently in port on Long Beach in California. Grid reference DM03VS. Satellite operations will take place from the sports deck next to the W6RO wireless room. Visitors are welcome, and hams with a copy of their valid radio license can board the ship for free on the 14th of December, so a saving of $40. QSL cards will be made available from the Associated Radio Amateurs of Long Beach using a link we'll put on the ICQ podcast webpage. So certainly a very interesting event, and if you're not in the area, certainly one well worth listening out for. As I say, to maybe catch the call sign W6RO on the air that weekend. So you've probably heard by now we have an ICQ podcast team going to Dayton Hamvention in 2020. So this is important news for anybody that might be thinking of coming along and saying hi to us in our lovely orange shirts. There's a rise in general admission of $4 per ticket to $26 in advance and $31 at the gate for all 3 days for attendees. Flea market spots will be going up by $5 per space, and the inside exhibitors will pay $30 more. Jack Gerbs, Whiskey Bravo 8 Sierra Charlie Tango, the general chair of Hamvention, says as always they strive to produce a high quality event for amateur radio enthusiasts from around the globe. We've always felt it is imperative we give back to amateur radio at many levels, and we've been very generous in our support over the years. The economic pressures to present a show like Hamvention are the reason for the price increase. They're asking for everyone's support and understanding as they move forward together. Now, I've got to be honest here, I know we don't like price rises, but I've got to be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Dayton Hamvention, and I would suggest, as much as none of us like price rises, I'm sure we could suffer this one for what is a very, very wonderful event. So, as I say, just that, heads up, guys. I say small increases coming for Hamvention in 2020. Well, we're going to head over to our features episode, which is a feature by our friend and colleague Bill Barnes, November 3 Juliet India X-Ray, entitled CW Invaders Game, which is a training aid for Morse code. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hey Bill, what's that hashtag CW Invaders thing you keep posting on Twitter? Well, that's today's feature. Today we're going to talk about CW Invaders, a nice little kit and game I got from Take Daigo, JQ1SRN. He's our friend in Yokohama, Japan. He's on Twitter at JQ1SRN. He also has a blog, which is in Japanese only, so you gotta use Google Translate on it. project59.blog.fc2.com. Back about, well over a year ago, I was floating around Twitter, checking out things that people were retweeting and stuff, and one of the things that came up was CW Invaders, game that Take-san made. It's basically a little kit you buy, very small little board with a AT-Mega chip on it, with a little screen, and it's a simple little game to improve your straight key operation skill in Morse. So the idea is that you practice Morse continually by playing the game. So Take-san put right in the direction manuals that he has a dream of a smooth straight key operation, don't we all? But he knew he needed practice, and so he came up with the game, which is CW Invaders. So the premise of the game is real simple. Invaders attack Earth. You need to shoot the invaders to protect our world by using Morse code. There's an English mode and a Japanese mode. He also warns that the game is addictive, which I can also agree with. It is addictive. This feels like the old Invaders game on the old Casio calculators. Oh, it's been a long time since I saw one of them. But the idea is that, Morse characters show up as invaders. You got to send the characters to make them go away. They get all the way across this from the left-hand side of the screen, you lose. This whole thing is based around a AT-Mega 328 chip that he programmed. and all the associated hardware around it to display on the screen and take input from your Morse key. There's only really like, I'm trying to remember, 19 different parts, 20 some parts total, and he has really nice directions on the English version of the manual, which he has posted on his Twitter feed. I'm looking at the version 2 manual right now. He suggests, less than an hour to assemble the kit. It took me 15, maybe 20 minutes to assemble the kit. The real trick was, making sure you got the, plus minuses on the one capacitor and the, socket for the IC set right. Other than that, it was no real tricks. It's just, pretty straightforward kit. The directions with pictures are really good. And he walks you through things. The new version of the kit, now I have the original version 1 CW Invader kit. The new one actually has a backlit screen on it, which is really nice. That's one thing I wish I had. So how do you play the game? You basically apply power. I'm using a 9-volt battery, straight key, and you turn the power on the power switch. Game comes up and it says, put a dot for English mode, put a dash for Japanese mode. And then it will show you the highest score that you've gotten so far, which is kind of nice as you get progress. There are 10 stages to the game. Well, actually, there's 30 stages to the game. The first set there's 10 stages. It's 99 invaders in a stage, and you need to attack them by sending the CW characters that are same as the invader characters. So you see a G on the screen, you send a G. You see a Z on the screen, you send that Z. If the invaders are dead, meaning that you sent it correctly, the character's changed to a star. If you send a character that's wrong, you actually lose points. The nice thing about this is the game actually shows you what character you sent, because I am really, really bad at sending with a straight key. And it was nice to see, well, what did it think I sent? And therefore I could, figure out my timing a little bit better. Recently I've given up on the straight key and actually have a keyer running into this thing. And that's how I was able to, get further along in the game. But still, even then, you send Morse characters with the keyer. You gotta make sure you're sending, you gotta send the right one. I'm still having trouble with iambic sending, so I send C's wrong and Q's wrong sometimes, so you lose points for that. The nice thing about it is you can actually play this game, and if you see multiple characters, you only have to send the character once, and it will actually clear out all the ones that match, so that you actually get bonus for doing that, and it slows them down a little bit. So stages 1 to 10 only sends A through Z. If you get past stage 10, it will send the numbers, 0 through 9 and A through Z from stage 11 to stage 20. On stage 21, it adds in some symbols, specifically the period, the comma, and the @ symbol on top of the numbers and letters. And it keeps getting faster and faster and faster as it increases. So it's definitely a challenging game as you get better on it. So if you're interested in learning more about this, I strongly encourage you to go out to Take's Twitter feed and download the version 2 English manual. And his let me find his handle on Twitter is @JQ1SRN, Juliet Quebec 1 Sierra Romeo Norway. And then on page 29 of the English directions, he actually tells you how to order it. So you have to send him a very specific formatted message to his Gmail account, and he actually lays out the template he needs. You need to actually send it in the template, and then he'll hit you up with a PayPal link that you'll need to pay for $35 plus shipping American. So for $40 you get the kit sent to you. I was shocked how quickly shipping happened. I ordered mine back in, I believe, March when I was taking my CW Ops Level 1 course, and it showed up within 2 weeks, which is really quick from Japan. He does show you some special codes so that you know, because not many people are familiar with the @ symbol in Morse. Dit, da, da, dit, da, dit. I didn't remember that one either, but that way it's in there. Now recently, like I said, I'm using the electronic keyer, and that way I can use my paddles, because I'm also working on sending through the through the keyer and that kind of stuff. And this game really, I play it at least once a week, if not more than once a week, trying to get a little bit better. But it definitely takes skill, and it gives you something to do before you get on the air, kind of like a warm-up. Fun little game. And, you know, people know have followed me on Twitter. I do like the games. Let me turn this on here. And that's it. The game is up and in English mode. Not sure if you could hear that on there. It's, Z. I got it. Now I can't send. So anyway, the game works there. It's very easy to learn, but takes a long, long time to master. So I hope you enjoyed today's feature. It is a fun little game, fun little kit to put together as well. And if you have any comments, just drop us a note, info@icqpodcast.com, and they'll get the message to me. Oh, I just lost. Aw. info@icqpodcast.com, and they'll get the info to me, and we'll go from there. Or check out Takeson's Twitter page at Juliet Quebec 1 Sierra Romeo Norway on Twitter, and go grab the English manual for CW Invaders version 2 and order yourself one and let me know your scores. I do share them. Some people are winning this game. They're getting up to level 30. He had enough people that got there that he actually created another ROM called Top Gun, which is even harder. Characters that go faster, you gotta send faster, you gotta send more speeds, and even people are able to beat that. So we got some serious Morse operators out there and are enjoying the game. So as always, whatever you do with ham radio, please have fun and have a great day. Thanks.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Many thanks, Bill Barnes, November 3, Juliet India X-ray there for your wonderful feature on CW Invaders Game as a trainee for Morse code. Thank you very much there for providing it for us. And I'm sure lots of insights for people who are interested in learning more or improving their Morse code. Quick bit of feedback here. Mark Stevens, Mike Zero, Hotel Zulu X-ray, popped a mail after the last episode there with a show there which included the interview with Bob Allison, Whiskey Bravo 1, Golf Charlie Mike. Said enjoyed the show as ever. Referenced the article about the history of UK universities. He's got a link to a short YouTube video that might be of interest to listeners. It's from the Ringway Manchester channel and is about Manchester's lost university societies. So we'll pop that link on the show notes page for episode 313, so you guys can check that out and say make sure that's fine from there. So as always, as I say, the ICQ podcast webpage is the page you go to find all your links and information you need from the show. This episode's donors: Peter Caffrey, Daniel Sullivan, Kilo Charlie 3, November Kilo Foxtrot, and our annual, monthly, and monthly subscription donors. They've helped us keep the show advert free. Please consider us by going to www.icqpodcast.com/donate. I would say whatever you find value in the show, pop our way, and we'd greatly appreciate it to keep our running costs nicely paid for. There's the YouTube channel. As always, you can check out previous videos from shows, etc. we've done. So that's youtube.com/ICQ podcast. There's also the Facebook group and our Twitter handles, as always, at Colin Butler and at M1MRB to keep up to date what's going on over the next fortnight. I'd like to thank Edmund Spicer M0MNG, Mike November Golf, Matthew Nassau Mike 0, November Juliet X-ray, Dan Romanchik, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Ruth Willet, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, for taking part in the news roundtable. That just about wraps up everything. I sent Martin off early to go make Mum a cup of tea and find a chocolate biscuit. So he's off doing that at the moment. And as I say, as we career now towards the end of the year and the season's holidays of Christmas and time with family, etc., do consider us, as we will continue to produce a show. We've got one more now between now and the end of the year, which we release just for Christmas. So obviously, feel free to give us a shout in the meantime and let us know what you're up to. So 73's all. Continue to enjoy the hobby, and we'll catch up again in a fortnight's time. Bye bye all.